Is there anybody you want in the room before you start? You're on mute.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah, I can see the mute sign. I couldn't see the cursor. No, I think you'll have one for it at the same time.
No problem. There's only a few people in there at the minute, so I'll just wait until they're in.
That's actually, if Steve Hughes and Melissa Kroger are part of the queue, let them through, 'cause it just gives them assurance that we've let them in as our speakers.
They are not there yet, but I will let them in as soon as I see them.
Lost them in the last 3 minutes.
Right, Melissa's here. There you go.
Hello.
Hey. Hi, Mel.
Hello again.
Hi.
Not done a runner in the last 3 minutes. That's good news.
Nearly did. No, I'm looking it.
Looking good, Mel.
Oh, thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you very much. It's because it's sunny outside. I'm smiling. Are you all right, Vicky?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm not technically here. I'm just letting everybody in, then I'm disappearing. So
No worries. I'll see you soon.
you're welcome.
We're on 1:30, aren't we? Because start letting folk through, Vicky.
Yep, no problem. All coming in now.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all well.
Morning, Dan. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
Hey.
Just letting everyone in through the waiting room. We'll be kicking off in just 1 minute. Okay, I think everyone who's meant to be in is in. So, hi, hello everyone. Good morning. If you don't know me, I'm Dan Fell. I'm the Chief Executive of Doncaster Chamber of Commerce, and it's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Free South Yorkshire Chambers to this quarterly economic survey webinar, kindly sponsored by our strategic partners at the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. If you've not been to one of these before, just a few little bits and pieces of digital housekeeping, and then a quick explainer on what the quarterly economic survey in this webinar is all about. So just on the housekeeping first, we've got an hour together this morning. Hopefully plenty of time for debate and Q&A. For the presentation, my colleague Steve will give in a moment. Steve's sort of super happy to take questions as that presentation unfolds. From there, we'll go into a bit of a discussion between me and Mel, who's our other guest speaker, and if we can take sort of questions on Mel's presentation and the topic of sort of planning. Once you get to the end of that, that'd be super. We are recording this webinar because we like to kind of post it on Chamber website to make it available to sort of partners who can't be here in person today. So please let us know if you have a problem with that. Hopefully that's cool with everybody. And then in terms of the intent about this and the QES itself, the Quarterly Economic Survey is the longest running and the biggest business perception survey in the UK. It's delivered across the Chamber network in this country. Here in South Yorkshire, working very closely with the Mayoral Combined Authority and specifically its Business Advisory Board, we seek to localise that survey on a quarterly basis, and that allows us to get under the bonnet of a range of hot topics that are sort of pertinent to economic development here in South Yorkshire. So in recent months and years, we've asked about access to finance, we've asked about transport priorities, business views on the state of our town and city centres. The last quarter, we did a bit of a deep dive into, the quarter before last, into sort of business crime. And then this quarter just gone, we've had a keen look at business views on the planning system locally. What we then seek to do is kind of take that insight and land it with our public sector friends and partners via a report that's available on our website. But in recent sort of years, we've introduced this webinar to sort of bring the report to life, share the findings, and get into some discussion about what businesses in our region are thinking and saying generally, and on the topic of the day. And this is part of a broader piece of work that the three chambers are doing at the moment on business insights, which includes a quarterly economic survey, but also the local skills improvement plan, where we're working really hard to kind of harness business sentiment and share that with our sort of friends and partners in the public sector who can do something about the issues and the challenges our business community are servicing and raising. So hopefully that's okay in terms of content and context. That's the meeting you're all here for. At that point, I'll stop rambling on and hand over to my colleague Steve. And Steve's going to give us a short presentation on the last quarter's results and what business is saying. Over to you, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Dan, and good morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. There's quite a few slides in this presentation, but I'm going to try and rattle through them at a fair pace just because there's a lot of content there. But as Dan said, if there's any questions, please do shout out as I go through them. I'm going to start talking about the local economic indicators, then talk about the results of the planning specific questions. On the local economic indicators, I think these results should come with somewhat of a health warning in that they're a little bit gloomy in terms of what we're seeing out there in the South Yorkshire economy. I'm going to start with domestic orders. This is a chart going back to 2020 of what firms are saying, how advance orders are looking. And if you look at that blue line, which is the balance of responses, you can see it's just tipped into negative territory for the first time in 2 years, meaning that more businesses are reporting worsening order books than improving order books. The indicator represents what's happening in the future, but we have another indicator at the same time which shows what happened in the last 3 months, and it was broadly the same picture. So a little bit of a decline showing contracting. It's also worth noting that on the export side of things, there was a bit more of a better picture, but that's often volatile, and also that data doesn't reflect anything that's happened recently in regard to kind of global trade and tariffs and everything else, which will be interesting to see what happens in the next QES as to how that affects things. So activity's dropped off, and so has labour market growth. Again, if we look at the blue figure here, we'll see that throughout the middle of 2023 to the middle of 2024, there was fairly consistent growth in workforces overall. That's now dropped off. That doesn't mean workforces are necessarily contracting. What it means is that they're remaining constant size. Nobody's hiring, but nobody's shedding staff particularly either. As is with a common sign of reduced economic activity, there's reduced recruitment difficulties as well. We've had a long period whereby firms have been reporting to us that there've been difficulties in getting staff, with all kinds of implications for that, and that's been going on for 18 months or so. It's actually dropped off to the lowest level for around 4 years on this indicator. So firms are finding it less hard. Those firms that are recruiting are finding it less difficult to find the staff that they want. Possibly one of the more worrying indicators is around cash flow. There's been a big drop off in cash flow performance. A lot more companies are reporting that their cash flow positions have worsened than have improved or remained the same. Again, it's the weakest result for 2 years. Around the end of 2022 and the start of 2023, there was a drop off in activity. There's a big spike in inflation at that time as well, which really damaged company bottom lines, and we're getting into that territory again at present as well. So cash flow positions are worsening, and that's been happening and getting gradually worse for the last 6 months or so. Investment intentions still positive, marginally. More companies are saying revised upward intentions in training. This is for than declining, but it's on a steadily downward trajectory over the last kind of 4 quarters or so. And the same is true of investment in capital and machinery as well. Not on this chart, but on another indicator that we have. Again, falling to the lowest level for a little while here since 2022 as well. And again, it's one of those things when cash flow is falling, typically kind of things like training budgets get squeezed as well. There'll be no surprises in this chart given what I've just said before, but confidence in profitability is notably weakened, with fewer than half of respondents anticipating improvement in the coming months. The same is true of confidence in what turnover is likely to do as well. So again, that drop off is just consistent with what we're seeing. And then finally, on the local economy, we have this chart around what concerns businesses most. And if you look at the right-hand side of the chart with this kind of purple line that spiked up in the last couple of months, last couple of quarters, that's corporate taxation. If you look at the comments that were made aligned to the survey, particular problems or issues with the national insurance increase that came through towards the end of last year or was announced towards the end of last year. Next to that purple line is this kind of lighter blue line, which represents inflation concerns. Again, back in 2022, 2023, there was this big spike in inflation driven a lot by energy costs and labour costs, but that gently got better as we went through the end of 2023 and 2024. It started to rise again. And again, I think it's labour costs and energy, which are the primary drivers of that, as dictated by the survey. So inflation prices had got better, but in terms of going forward or more recently, started to get worse again. So that's the local economy. We'll go on to the planning questions now. The first question that we asked was around satisfaction levels with different elements of planning applications. If you want to concentrate on the yellow and red lines taken together, with red being very unsatisfied and yellow being unsatisfied, the length of time taken for planning applications was the greatest area of dissatisfaction amongst respondents, with around 62% of respondents dissatisfied to extent to almost 2/3. That's the addition of the yellow line and the red line there. But on the flip side, generally a lot of satisfaction with the outcome of planning applications. So that's that big blue line in the bottom category there, and in addition with the green side of things there. So a lot of satisfaction with outcomes, a lot of dissatisfaction with the length of time taken to get to those outcomes, and generally satisfaction, greater satisfaction than unsatisfaction related to communication and customer service related to planning applications. This was a question around delays. So again, it kind of feeds into that thread around what happens when the planning decisions aren't made in what's regarded as a timely manner. So 15% of respondents said there was no negative impact associated with planning delays, but others highlighted quite wide-ranging consequences. Some missed commercial opportunities or wasted investments were things that directly impact on business bottom lines. But then there's other issues there which kind of more broadly affect the local economy. So scaled back ambitions or delays on hiring new staff were consequences as well, chosen by 1/5 of respondents. This question was around awareness of support mechanisms that are available to businesses in South Yorkshire to support their planning proposals. I think the overall message here is that no support mechanism out of the 5 listed here generated more than 1/3 of respondents having any awareness. I mean, the greatest amount of awareness was planning consultants, which was where there was awareness of about 28% of respondents. Planning consultants and pre-application advice were the most common awareness issues. And at the bottom there, support from local authorities, economic impact teams, or getting advocates to speak at planning committees at the least level of awareness that existed. Ease of engagement with the planning assistant outside of submitting an application. More than half of respondents stated that it was difficult, either difficult or very difficult, 59% in total. but around 1 in 10 found it was very easy. And then which aspects of the planning system would the respondents say should be treated as top priorities for improvement? And we asked them to rank priorities from 1 to 5. It's the kind of top green line in each category that's the first priority. So as you'll see, the timeliness of decision making, again, at the top category is the biggest priority for improvement, logically following from the earlier slides that we noticed. The lowest priority for improvement is the quality of support available from the private sector. That was often put down as the lowest priority by respondents. But also you had other areas such as the application process and the pre-application process having kind of secondary importance behind timely decision making around areas of improvement. And finally, on the final slide, we asked around confidence in government planning reforms, how confident respondents were that government's forthcoming planning reforms will address the priorities that they'd listed. There was little confidence in these areas that these priorities would be addressed, but equally more than half didn't really have a view. They were neither confident nor unconfident, and that might speak to a lack of awareness of what those reforms are, or indeed how it will play out in the real world. So I'll stop there. I'll stop showing my screen. And obviously, if there's any questions on any of that, more than happy to take them on either the economy or the planning results.
Perfect. Thanks ever so much, Steve, and thanks, Steve, for all you do to help bring these results to life for us in the region. Probably, if it's okay with you attendees, we'll pivot over to Melissa now to bring that to life from a small business perspective, and then we'll kind of take questions in the round, following a bit of an input from Mel. So again, if you're new to these QES webinars, what we try and do is sort of bring this to life by bringing a chamber member into these calls who sort of got quite hands-on experience of the issues we've done a deep dive into. And today it's a real pleasure actually to introduce Melissa Kroger, who's the chief exec and owner of Fenwood Estates, great SME developer and house builder. I've had the privilege of seeing one of Mel's developments actually up at the airport estate only this last week, and just really great quality product and doing great things for our communities. So Melissa, can I just firstly pass to you, and like the first very softball question, which I promise you will be, is like, can you just tell us a little bit about, Fenwood and sort of your role in life and what the business looks and feels like, please? Then we'll get into the topic a little more.
Yeah, of course. And thanks, Dan, there for your compliments. It was great to show you around the other day. So, yeah, I'm Melissa Kroger. As Dan says, I'm the owner of Fenwood Estates Limited. We're based just up by the airport at Oakley. And we predominantly develop homes around South Yorkshire, sometimes into Nottinghamshire, over to Retford and places like that, but essentially mostly we're in the South Yorkshire region. We're currently developing sort of 30 to 60 homes a year, desperately trying to expand beyond that, but with the constraints such as the planning system that we're going to talk about shortly, we would like to be pushing out 100 to 150 a year if things sort of sort themselves out in that sector. I took the business over from my father, who retired about 5 years ago, and we're just growing from strength to strength but as the legislation keeps coming in the planning world, we're just getting held back. I looked at some quick statistics earlier in terms of our contribution to the housing numbers in the UK as an SME. And for instance, back in the late 1980s, when my father was sort of in his prime of the startup of this business, SMEs were churning out sort of 40% of the UK housing. Sadly now, and in the last statistics of 2024, we're only contributing to 9% as an SME house builder in the whole of the UK. So the sort of drop in those figures clearly shows that the systems and processes are a massive factor of what's stopping us from being out there and sort of producing that 40%. Things at the moment, things are still tough out there, mainly due again to the constraints, legislation and red tape, but also because things like mortgage rates and finance deals, etc., holding us back from purchasers not buying the new homes. So that's becoming, we're stuck with stock, so that's tight on cash flow. And the planning system is just still very, very, very slow. A final factor in South Yorkshire for us is the viability of sites. When we're working out viability, for example, in Doncaster, Doncaster Council now enforce full NDSS 100% across all new sites, which means we're building all the homes bigger, but yet the sales values of the homes across most of Doncaster are still sort of stagnant or in some cases have dropped slightly. So again, the bottom line is just constantly squeezed, really. So yeah, we get it from all angles, from planning, viability, cash flow, recruitment, everything that the economic survey sort of flagged out when Steve's just been chatting through it.
Well, thanks, Mel. Appreciate that. And apologies, colleagues. The lights have just gone off in our office, but hopefully you can still hear me if you can't still see me. Uh, Mel, just what are your sort of reflections on the data in that survey? You know, are there any surprises in there for you? You know, and does it sort of chime with your experience of planning?
Yeah, the one that I picked up on when I was just sort of having a look back through it this morning, was that it surprised me that the outcome, the percentage of people happy with their outcome of planning, against the percentage of people that are dissatisfied with the timeliness of the planning process. So when just in general, when I'm speaking to other developers, yes, the time's a massive factor, but we're also getting massively squeezed on the what our schemes end up looking like, whether it's the local authorities contributing to the mix of the homes we now have to put on the sites or knocking homes off to forfeit for the ecology side. So yeah, I was quite surprised to see how many were satisfied with their outcomes at the end of it.
Yeah, and thanks, Melissa. And you know, every time we speak about this, you are, you know, always sort of really sort of measured and balanced on this because we recognise there's, you know, systemic challenges that sort of those working in planning, you know, bit powerless to solve themselves, you know, and there's good people there trying to do a great day's work and kind of get growth going in the area. So sort of, and you know, this next couple of questions, like, so just bring to life a little bit more for us, like the real world impact of those frustrations, of those delays. But then, so we know where this is going, the next question will be, but actually tell us a little bit about the best practice you see sometimes as well, and when people do go above and beyond to help out.
Yeah, I mean, starting off with the best practice, so it's not sort of all doom and gloom. I think the local authorities, particularly, I've worked with Doncaster for the site at Ayr just in the last couple of years, and I'm now working quite closely with, funnily enough, Gary Hildersley, who was formerly at Doncaster, now at Barnsley. And these sorts between Doncaster and Barnsley, I do find that or particularly with Barnsley, the pre-app, so the good practice in terms of trying to push on now with the pre-app side of things, giving clear guidance in the pre-app sort of process so that we know what the scheme's going to look like and what we need to do to jump into that full application. I think some of the local authorities are now starting to pull together better digital platforms. So in terms of their portals, ease of use of those portals, some of the local authorities now have interactive local plans on there. So in terms of sort of good practice, I think things like that help us as SME or all developers, but to get online and have quick access to these sorts of plans and updates on our applications, etc., rather than trying to hunt down a person for an update. And some back to Barnsley and to Doncaster, we've worked really well with proactive planning teams where you can jump on a call with a planning officer or a Teams, and you can pull in your architect or your planning consultant. All of those sorts of things I feel are good practices and are filtering out more and more, since all developers are sort of shouting up and needing a voice and needing that communication. What was the first part that you wanted?
And then I suppose just to bring to life for us, I suppose the other side of the coin. Now, we've sort of heard about kind of sometimes when teams aren't accessible, the communication's not there, or the length of time it takes. Just like the real world impact of that. What does that mean in terms of jobs, of commercial opportunity? Impact on your clients.
Yeah, so I think the biggest factor for us at the moment is the sort of losing out on deals. So we're coming across deals where we need very quick advice to see if we try and hunt down and look for allocated sites. Sometimes sites don't tick all the boxes, and we need very quick advice to see if we can make it viable, make it work. Are we going to get the planning that we need on it again to make it viable? And have confidence to take on new people, site managers, labourers, etc., to push on. Because we can't get the quick answers, the deal may well fall away, because ultimately, and usually one of the national developers will scoop up and buy something not subject to planning because they can. So we sort of lose out in that space. But I think as well, spending the amount of money that we have to spend now to get down the application and planning process, on the sort of sites that we speculate on, we need between £200,000 and £300,000 before we can even begin to put a spade in the ground. Again, with all the housing stock that we've got stuck, finished and ready that we can't sell because of the external economic factors and market, we reach a cash flow strangle very quickly, and then we just can't progress.
What would sort of help most in the system, Melissa? If you had like a magic wand and you could, have one or two tweaks or fundamental changes, your call. No, what would they be?
I think streamlining the system, it's got very overcomplicated, complex, many people having their views and their say, and often consultants within the local authority not agreeing between themselves. So I think just some form of a streamlined system that's got a time frame back on it. So we used to say 12 weeks for a full planning application. That was perfect. That would be the perfect scenario, because we could all move on very quickly and push on and take on more sites at once.
Yeah. And sort of, what would you say the private sector's doing to help itself? Because you've got some fairly well rehearsed kind of narratives here. Me and you spoke about this not just over a period of months, but over a period of years. And it feels like businesses collaborate quite well in terms of planning forums or kind of going together as kind of groups of developers to kind of raise concerns.
Yeah.
What do you see the industry doing to help itself in this space? Because this isn't just about us asking for stuff to be done for us, is it? As a business community, we're trying to present some solutions ourselves too.
Yeah, I think in the main what developers are trying to do now is get sort of invest early and find out as much as we can in the pre-app process by going into that pre-app process rather than jumping into full applications. So we're giving ourselves the opportunity to sort of understand what's going to work on a site, what the planners are going to be looking for, etc. I think that the community engagement that we all try to get involved in upfront as well, particularly where you've got a larger scheme coming into, say, a village and such like. So engaging with the community, talking upfront to them, explaining who you are, what impact you're going to bring across to their village, town, etc. So community engagement's massive, so that they buy in to it, and then obviously that hopefully would reduce any objections during the formal planning process. And I think that we, such as the Home Builders Federation and the Federation of Master Builders, these sorts of organisations, as SMEs, we're now talking and getting involved with them their voices sort of heard at government level. So we're trying to use other channels to get out there, to try and get this system moving and build the houses that we need.
Brilliant. Thank you, Melissa. And one of the things that sort of struck me as Steve was kind of giving a readout of the data is that there are things that businesses can do to sort of enlist help from elsewhere. Again, previously we've got letters of support for your organization and so forth, but
Yep.
people don't often seem to know what those mechanisms are. Does that bit of the data surprise you? And do you think there's perhaps more we could do to sort of tell people that help is at hand?
I think the results again speak for themselves in terms of a lot of developers are aware of planning consultants. Again, it's about affordability with those. They can be very expensive and some developers try not to use them, but then obviously they lose out. The key thing for me is, and what I didn't understand, Dan, until you came forward as a chamber for Fenwood with a letter of support for our development here at Ayr, was how closely the chamber and such as the local authorities do work together. They work on all sorts of things. You give thoughts and feelings on some policy, etc. I don't think people realise that the chamber can support in for a development. I didn't know that myself until we spoke, and then you obviously assess the situation and pop that letter of support forward. And I think it adds massive weight to that.
Yeah, and I think people sort of often, you think about planning, people kind of think about people who are going to protest or complain or critique or do not in my backyard stuff. But it's, I think it's easy to kind of forget that people do want some of this stuff to happen as well, and the consequences of it in terms of changing a neighborhood, creating jobs, creating opportunity, etc. And sometimes it's just as simple as asking for someone to lend a hand, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it just brings somebody else in than it feeling like it's the developer against the local authority. It's sort of not a mediator, but just somebody coming in with a positive impact.
Perfect. Well, Melissa, thanks for giving us kind of your worldview. That sort of brings us to sort of roughly halfway through this webinar. So we'll kind of pause there and then kind of open up the floor to kind of questions and comments and try and broaden the conversation.
Okay.
Absolutely brilliantly, my opposite number, Carrie's put her hand up first, which saves me the job of hurriedly trying to text her whilst talking at the same time and saying, Carrie, can I come to you first? It's like we've done this before.
Absolutely. Perfect partnership, aren't we? Hi, everyone. It's almost coming back to you, Melissa, a little bit. So I'm Carrie, Chief Executive Barnsley and Rotherham, and we have a really quite active planning and property forum. I'm a complete novice on this, so I'm sorry if I get the terminology incorrect, but I've just jotted down some kind of thoughts of what seems to be coming out of our group. Resource issues are there, and I'm speaking generally, so apologies if I cause any offence to anyone, but it's not just the amount of people. I think it's the processes, as you said, there's a bit of a backlog there.
Yeah.
And some of the comments have been flexi working and home working is actually a big issue on this. So if you need an answer on a Friday, you might not get it, for example. And it's not just the amount of people, it's kind of the way time is used wisely in teams as well. So there's some of the comments that we fed back to local authorities. So one of the actions that they're trying to counteract on that is using time within the teams to upskill and retain the talent within their teams, rather than it all landing on the head of planning or whatever. And then a second ask is almost, is there a possibility to have some kind of human intervention on some of these decisions? I totally appreciate that, it's either a computer says yes or a computer says no type decision, but there's an ask there, and in your experience, could a lot more get be signed off and it have a bit more of a positive impact if someone actually just stepped up and said, I know it doesn't quite fit the target of a 3 mil curb drop, but if we did it, it'll generate X if we did this. Do you find that we need a bit more kind of ownership in some of the decisions that are being made, either positively or negatively?
Yeah, absolutely, Carrie. You've probably hit the nail on the head there. I think things do go around in circles between, say, highways and your urban design and your drainage. And it's like obviously, unless it's detrimental to the scheme or it's going to cause some sort of surface water issue, or like you say, just small technicals that could be overcome or agreed between the departments very quickly to say, look, this is then going to deliver 40 homes. If we do X, we're going to lose 10 homes potentially. I don't know. It's a little bit of common sense. And I think sometimes there becomes a little bit of a one-upmanship between the different consultants within. And you seem to find, highways or ecology are always the winners. So it's just a bit more of a common sense approach for somebody to stand up and go, come on, this is going to generate X and it's silly. Or actually, no, it is actually detrimental. Let's stick to our guns. So I think that's a really good, valid point.
Absolutely. And we've discovered that we could put all the bodies in planning we wish if there was enough money to do so. It just pushes the problem onto legal or highways possibly. So it's finding that where the pressure points are. There's always going to be a pressure point. It's just going to be kicked down the lane a little bit. And then this is where my lack of knowledge comes in. But a bit of a radical idea that we've generated from our board is it's apparent that it's the same kind of costs, pre-app costs, if you're a small SME working on a development or a large national house building. If you're building 40 houses or 1,500 houses, it's the same kind of cost pressures. So there's been a bit of a radical idea that we've floated but it's pricked a few ears up actually, that to almost waiver the Section 106 for SMEs. I don't know if that makes sense what I've just said, but there seems to be a bit of traction there that actually if there's something quite radical or practical that we could start waving a flag under, it could be that, certainly for the SME kind of voice.
Yeah, certainly. So with the Section 106 I think I mentioned earlier, just when Dan and I were chatting, that part of the issue for us in and around South Yorkshire is the viability of a lot of the projects. So the landowner requires X for his site. Local authorities want X under the Section 106, dependent on which local authority it is. Developer being funded by an external funder needs to show at least 18 to 20% as a minimum on their bottom net line. And ultimately, when all those things are thrown into the mix, the land values are coming out negative. So you're trying to tick all the local authority boxes. If you come forward with a viability argument, which funnily enough, I did do this on our site at Ayr at Oakley. And by the time we'd gone through the process of battling the Section 106 to make the land value back into positive and our figures into positive, we probably spent just shy of 100,000 to get the 106 working for us. And we spent more on it than what we actually ended up decreasing under the 106. So it became just a no point exercise. And that's why we're struggling to find. We don't want to do these battles. And I think on certain sites of a certain size, some of the 106 maybe should be dropped or lessened. I don't know, maybe you could keep it there, but just look at smaller percentages, because ultimately, if you try and tick every box, the sites just do not stack up.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for the floor.
No, thank you. And I think we've got some 3 really key takeaways from that exchange, actually. I think there's this kind of yes, if rather than no, because bias that we sort of want to engender in a system. I think there's that combined conversation with sort of planning, highways and others, casually. Let's do it once and well as a debate. And I think there's proportionality in terms of what we look for from SMEs versus large business, recognizing the makeup of our business stock locally feels like a good line of inquiry, actually. Can I just kind of throw open to the floor again, then any of sort of comments or questions from people on the call? Okay, just to buy a bit of thinking time. If I could sort of take a worldview from you, Melissa, but I'm sure like colleagues like sort of Alex or Tracy on the call would have a take on this sort of too. How sort of visible does it feel like the planners are on the system are to our business communities? And just to bring this to life a little bit, the chamber in our council here in Doncaster years ago used to have this kind of debate about local spend and buy local, and really Doncaster does brilliantly at that. That's like 80% ish sort of bought bought locally. But one of the things that it felt to me really shifted the dial on that was like a great head of procurement at the time. He just kind of put the shoe leather in. He went where business goes. He went to sort of business networking. He was a chamber events. He was the opening with Amber, sort of frankly, but it just meant it was easy to have those upstream and informal chats. And it doesn't feel to me that happens in the same way with planners, for example. Melissa, would you have a view on that? And any other colleagues kind of want to pitch in terms of how often they think that happens?
In my experience, I've found it fairly easy, to be fair, to be in contact with some of the head planning officers. I've struck good relationships with them through the various processes, and once you've got that relationship, it's easy to reach out. That's not to say for people SMEs that haven't worked with certain local authorities, they may find it very difficult to reach out, and there's no channels to get that direct approach. But for me, over many years and over lots of networking, I've got myself into a position where, and I've had to, so I can reach out because we need to. So Gary Hildersley, Scott Cardwell, all the guys between the two local authorities that I've worked with. For me, it's been fairly easy, but it's not to say that reflects the rest of the SME community.
Yeah. Actually, just last week, actually, as it happens, I was absolutely staggered that someone who I thought was very well known and networked in our business community didn't know Scott, for example, who I think is just super visible and brilliant and accessible. And it was like, he's like, how do I get to Scott? It's like, you just ask him. It's just that simple. There we go. Anyway, Tracy, can I come to you next, and then Alex, if that's okay.
Sorry, I'm in our main office. There might be some background noise. Really just very anecdotally, certainly in Sheffield, I think because of the planning process and there's been changes, there have been issues for SMEs to actually make that initial question and sometimes find the right person before they put a planning application. If they've got some queries or want to understand the process, or something's gone in and they want to know what happens next, there seems to be a gap in the communication to be able to do that really nice Q&A or frequently asked questions bit seems to be missing to take some of the mystery out of it. And I think that's possibly one of the areas where the planning department sort of that sit in silos. Once you're in and have a relationship, that's very different. But as you're beginning that stage or that process, sometimes it's a bigger barrier.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tracy. Alex, can I bring you in there next, please?
Yeah, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Melissa, for your kind of candid thoughts. Alex Dockery from Business Doncaster definitely recognise a lot of the kind of challenges and issues that Melissa kind of has kind of seen and felt, and obviously that kind of extrapolated across the UK as well. Obviously, we've heard in the media some of the reforms that the government are looking to put in place. I think here in Doncaster, I mean, I guess we're always keen to kind of strengthen that communication between our planning department and local businesses, house builders, etc. And we are trying to use all the forums at our disposal to encourage that to happen. I know the planning team do go out to, we also have a Doncaster Property Forum that we kind of coordinate and organise on a quarterly basis. They are out in force at those events, obviously been a showcase. They're there, but that's a once a year event. And I know through the chamber, we're looking to collaborate on a Your City, Your Say event that looks to bring together council services on a more regular basis so they can interface with businesses. So businesses have that chance to kind of have that dialogue, build that rapport and ask questions as well. And I think going back to Tracy's point, it's that need to kind of really ask questions before they really get going on some of these schemes, or sometimes they have to respond quite quickly around opportunities, and knowing who to contact, knowing getting a response, that's really important. So we definitely recognize those kind of pain points, and I think from kind of our side, I think again we know that communication and time sometimes is an issue. I think the view that we tend to feel from local businesses is that the planning team and the council tend to be quite pragmatic about kind of how they go about their jobs. So they do try and find solutions to problems, but obviously appreciate that sometimes that does take up quite a lot of time, and and those quick decisions take longer to be made ultimately. But yeah, no, thank you, Melissa, for obviously your candid thoughts, and obviously I think Dan, in terms of obviously the ongoing conversation with the council, is probably more to go there around how do we really have that business friendly planning kind of system, as well as obviously an authority more broadly anyway.
Yeah. Perfect. And also let's do remember, balance is important on this because at times you are getting this really right as well, and that's been part of kind of rebuilding South Yorkshire's reputation as a good place to do business. So I kind of think it's just important to kind of get the yin and the yang of these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
Steve, can I kind of come back to you just in terms of the sort of the broader economic picture because there's no real surprises in the kind of overall kind of QES message. These are very tough times, and it is a bit bleak out there. But I just sort of wonder, given your sort of long-term relationship with the Quarterly Economic Survey and sort of your career as an economist, like maybe just kind of give us a sense of the urgency that we need to tackle some of these other issues like planning, because that some of these trends are sort of getting to historic kind of bad points, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And I think it's not just the fact that there's obviously a downturn in activity, it's the fact that we never really got over the previous kind of challenges in the business environment that happened in kind of 2022, 2023. So that was around high inflation and costs more generally. The labour market was in a very tight position at the time. As we know from Doncaster, there was a lot of difficulty in finding the right staff, and that was pushing up wage costs as well. Then things got slightly better, and now they're on the downturn again. So it's just been a longish period of difficult operating environment, and that's where this kind of stuff around, planning, but also the broader regulatory environment is really important, because if there are increased barriers from those that are created by legislation or systems not working very well, then it just means it's just generally harder to do stuff. And that's why the new government getting its reforms in place are very important. Now, in addition to all of that, there's obviously the problems with the public finances, and I'm just listing bad things that are happening now, but there's problems with the public finances, which means that there's possibility more tax rises on the way. But then obviously we have the situation with tariffs, America, trade, and how that might play out in the coming weeks, which is inevitably just going to have a huge effect on the UK economy and our trading partners more broadly as well. So I guess the message is from this kind of stuff, if we can get things right that are within our gift and control to get right, then it will inevitably soften the blows of the external forces that are creating a more challenging business environment more generally.
Thanks, Steve. And I won't sort of get into the habit of sort of describing you as the person who lists bad things as your job description, but it's a good explainer of what an economist does in life, isn't it? So yeah, I think that which is like the whole deregulation piece, I think is sort of interesting here. We had the Prime Minister up in Doncaster last week connected to the reopening of the region's airport. Great visit, great signal of support. And when we met with PM, we were sort of talking about the fact that money is one of the obstacles, but also reclaiming our airspace is another one of those things in terms of the critical path. But actually playing back to him that sort of government-led drive to kind of deregulate, to kind of declutter, and the fact that that was one of the things that is getting in the way of his own commitment now to kind of get that airport reopened was just really, really powerful. And I just sort of think there's something here as a kind of a collective voice where, we can sort of play that back into our own ecosystem and say this stuff is really getting in the way, and we just, like there is an urgency attached to it. So we've got to just be a bit bigger and braver in terms of the decluttering and the fact we've perhaps been in the past on this. Any other sort of, I don't want to sort of prolong this unnecessarily. Any other kind of comments or questions from the floor, or back to Steve and Melissa, anything that you sort of wanted to get off your chests in this session that has just sort of organically happened as part of the conversation?
Oh, I was going to pick up on what Alex sort of mentioned earlier. I didn't quite get to it. Oh, somebody else talking. Yeah. Sorry.
I think that's someone in Tracy's office.
Oh, so Alex, just just back to Doncaster and sort of their help and support with SMEs over the last 2 to 3 years, I would say now. We did set up some, between myself and Scott, we set up some SME quarterly developer teams calls, so such as Fenwood, Albemarle, other SMEs within South Yorkshire, as well as just Doncaster. We're jumping on and expressing our concerns and issues, and a lot of help came from that. So those sorts of things as well, just engaging SMEs like Doncaster have done and did start to do last year, I thought was excellent. And we should push on and try and encourage that through all of the local authorities within South Yorkshire, just quarterly jumping on with the SMEs and seeing what the issues are, and can we help, and can we streamline and work together. I think the partnership side of it is probably key. So it's great to work direct with the local authorities. So Doncaster have been excellent with that. So be good for everyone to follow.
Brilliant, thanks, Melissa. It's yeah, sometimes don't need rocket science stuff here, do we? Just the right people in the right room having the right conversations is a huge part of the solution in many areas.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, colleagues, we'll probably sort of call it a day there if that's okay. So huge thanks to Steve as always for great presentation. Thank you ever so much, Melissa, for being our sort of expert in the room and being as candid as you have on what you're experiencing in SME. And thank you, Philip and Simca colleagues, for sort of sponsorship of the QES activity. It's much appreciated. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please tell your colleagues and peers about it. We do this once a quarter. The next one of these will be on the 17th of July. Our next economic survey is going to be focused on issues related to business growth, business support, and international trade. As always, we'll be sort of co-creating that survey and those lines of inquiry with our partners at Simca, the Business Advisory Board, and others in our sort of economic development world. As a chamber network, we're always super open to requests for sort of survey topics or things that our partners want to know about and get a private sector sort of sense check on. So if there's things percolating in your world at the back of your minds, let us know. We'd be delighted to have a conversation and to see if we can help. And if you want to look into a bit more forensic detail on the things we've talked about today, the full report on QES is available on the websites of all the chambers in the region. Final thing to mention just on this topic specifically, we're starting to socialise this as a chamber network, and we're talking to some of our members about it already and some of our authority partners. But our umbrella body, the British Chambers of Commerce, has partnered with Aviva to get the ball rolling on a fighting fund to put people through planning degrees and so forth with for the first couple of years of work needing to be ring-fenced to working in the public sector to help unjam some of the blockages and the sort of the workforce shortages we've talked about today. So if the sort of local authorities, particularly on this call, are interested in hearing a bit more about that scheme, how they could benefit, how we could collaborate to sort of top up that fighting fund with more contributions from local businesses, please reach out to me, to Tracy, to Carrie, other chamber colleagues in the network, and be delighted to see how we can collaborate on that one too. And hopefully, just as we rehearse some of these challenges via reports, like the one we published and the call we had today, hopefully knows about us. We want to be sleeves rolled and finding solutions too. So we're keen for that conversation. Perfect. Unless there's any other comments from the floor, we'll close it there. Have a great Easter holiday, everyone, when it comes, and we'll see you hopefully on the 17th of July for the next one of these calls. Take care, till
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks,
Thank
Dan.
you.
then.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
So.
Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Hope that was all right.
I thought it was more than all right, but we'll take that from you. We know you're a harsh self-critic.
See you
Very
later.
good. Have a great Easter.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
So Gemma's Gemma's still on the call, so obviously
You can leave it all if you're in for
I know,
all.
but I need to end the call, stop recording.